most boring Pogačar expert in the world at the moment. There's so much useless information that didn't go in the book, and hopefully some useful stuff that did go in.
Do you want to just hear the intro I gave for you?
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
that'd be nice.
Andy McGrath is the acclaimed British author of cycling novels God is Dead, Tom Simpson Bird on the Wire, and now Tadej Pogačar Unstoppable. We've worked together for almost 2 decades as cycling journalists. He was one of 4 people I knew in the UK before buying a one-way ticket there to work for Cycling Weekly and Cyclesport magazines way back in 2012. Incredibly intelligent, a triplet, and off the bike, so to speak, a quintessential British lad. We have a tequila shot tradition at the end of grand tours and the start of birthday parties, which I'd tell you about if I could remember. But today we're talking cycling and specifically Tadej Pogačar. Andy, thank you for joining Spokes.
What an intro. Got to keep that in. Well, it is intimidating slightly, but we're not always on the clock working.
Yeah, the tequila shots he's talking about there, not Tadej Pogačar. So, Andy, this book, Tadej Pogačar Unstoppable, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is the first book in any language on Tadej. Is that true? And is there a weight or a joy that comes with authoring that?
So I found out last week it's the first non-AI book to be published. Basically, someone...
I don't even want to know what that means.
Well, I was under the impression it was the first book. And then Ned Boulting, the British broadcaster.
We know Ned, yeah.
Yeah, British Voice of Cycling. I was around here doing a podcast, and he told me that he had ordered a Pogačar book last year that he knew was written by AI. Like, the cover didn't look like Pogačar, and it was like 80 pages long. So I'm still going to claim it as the first one. It definitely is the first one that is an actual, human-written labour of kind of love, birth to this year kind of story. And what did it mean to me? Writing it? Was that the second bit?
Yeah, 100% robots don't count to start with. Like, it's the first book. That scares me, the AI thing. But anyway, it's the first book written by a human about Tadej Pogačar. We're going to say it's the first.
The AI one.
Yeah.
I mean, that mistake, yeah.
Yeah, my question was, and I kind of want to get into this with you, but this is my second question, and the cover of your book alludes to this, but is there a weight or a joy or a responsibility that you feel in penning that?
Yeah, there's a pressure, to especially capture new, obviously, for any project you want to bring new insight and new stories that not just excite the reader, but, me writing it, like, I want to find out interesting things. Like, I don't want to be going over the same anecdotes or the same details. You want to be surprised. But it's Pogačar who's done probably the most interviews of any pro cyclist in the last 10 years, let alone 5 years. So there's a pressure on me. There's a pressure to get things right. You don't want to. I don't want to get sued by Tadej Pogačar. So far, so good. Touch wood. Yeah, you want to. And it being the first one, it really. Yeah, I really wanted to. I was quite perfectionist with it, which probably won't come as any surprise. It really has to sing, like maybe this is going to be the first of, as I think I wrote in the book, this could be the first of many books written about Pogačar or around Pogačar, or cycling in the 2020s. So in a way, hopefully it's some kind of trailblazer in a way, or it's going to set a standard for sure when it comes to him. So there was a weight, and he isn't the easiest to get close to. That also comes hand in hand with his superstar status. He's like...
Yeah, he's got an entourage now. Yeah.
He always has, but I was saying to someone the other day, like, it's not like we remember when Team Sky were number one, like Froome, Wiggins, all the rest of it. There's still, to be honest, a greater friendliness like around UAE and his entourage than there ever was with Team Sky, like in terms of media and openness. Like, they still are basically like Lamprey were, which is the old team they were 10 years ago. They just happened to have this incredible bike racer who's winning everything on their team.
They
And he
also
isn't.
serve the best coffee at the team bus. Just
Yeah,
FYI
exactly.
to other journalists listening.
So like, entourage is like a scary word, but obviously, Luke takes him around the journalist, but that's because he has to, because he is. Everyone wants to like talk to him, but there's not a fear factor there with talking to him. There's not like a blacklist, I think. Well, I
No.
did check that with the rider, and he said no, so it's fine.
Interesting. We'll come back to that. How did this idea come about? Because the book, to my knowledge, I haven't got a, being in Australia, I haven't got a copy yet. But my understanding is it charts his sort of childhood through to his Triple Crown in 2024. So how does it land with you to write this? And how does it differ from the previous acclaimed books that you've written?
Yeah, it actually goes all the way through to this year too. So I couldn't quite fit in the World Champs, and basically up to this year's Tour de France. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, your deadline was
Yeah,
that's
really
yeah.
punchy. It was really punchy.
And he's done some work this year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, it kind of came up. Well, I had the idea of writing his autobiography a few years ago, actually after he lost the tour the second time to Jonas Vingegaard in 2023. And I talked to his agent, and for various reasons, it wasn't the right time, which is totally fair enough. Like, he was even younger then. Like, probably writing an autobiography of a 24, 25-year-old would be too soon. But when this opportunity like arose last winter, like I knew it was a story the world needs to hear. Like, Luke, who's Tadej's press officer or the team press officer, I think he told me when I mentioned it to him that he can't believe someone hasn't written it yet, and he's right. Like, people want to know more about this guy. They want to. There's no big picture, like, to his victories, which is quite especially important now. Like, with every win he takes, I kind of feel like people, they don't see that it's not inevitable, that it's not inexorable, that there were various junctions on the journey where this could easily not have happened. Like, and it can be like something as obvious as the Vingegaard defeats. He lost 6 minutes on Col de la Loz. Like, that's not nothing. Like, some people never recover from that mentally. Champions. Like, something as obvious as that. It can be something as small as if he hadn't developed physically when he was, let me think about it, 16, 17 years old for that last junior season. There's all these like sliding doors moments, and you see that it was really not written in the stars for this slight teenager to be, the kind of Goliath of pro cycling. Sorry, I gone off on a tangent there, but yeah, like, once it came up, I had 9 months to write it basically, and
Wow.
but I also realised that, like we all have in a way, we've all been there for his career from start to finish. So I I kept lots of old interviews that were really useful, like with his parents and Alan Piper. When you're charting his journey through time, that was so handy. Talking about 2021, 2020. And I realised, I was he's a specialist subject for me without even trying that hard. There were loads of things I already knew. But yeah, even after kind of the book was agreed with kind of Bloomsbury, then it was, going to Slovenia, going to the UAE. I went to the UAE tour to the country for the first time. Went to Milan San Remo because I was like, I could write a book with just collaging quotes, just taking them from old interviews, and it would be acceptable. It would be okay, totally fine. But I didn't want to do that. So it cost me a bit more money, a lot more time and effort. But the end product is always worth it. When you can get stuff face to face, and the UE tour. Pogačar was as close to me as my computer screen is now, with a few other journalists around him. Like, it was incredible access, and it was all worth it basically, which is nice.
Yeah. That was my next question I was going to ask, was how immersed did you get into his world? Because I know when we worked together at Cycling Weekly and Cycle Sport, I, for one, was like so immersed in the sport that I would wake up on a weekend and have to look at the ceiling and be like, what country am I in? What province am I in? What race am I in? What like stage is it? What day is it? Who did you speak to? And yeah, how involved did you get?
I went deep. I talked to around 50 people who are kind of close to him over the years. Went to his old school in Comenda, which is basically his hometown, you know. He's from a little hamlet, like Clanich, but it's Comenda. Yeah, let's see, you know, mentors and managers like Andre Houtman. I talked to him, went to his home, and he's been there, you know, from the age of, for Pogačar, from his teenage years all the way through to the 4 Tour wins and everything else. I talked to his homeroom teacher at his secondary school who didn't even know he was a talented cyclist, you know, and until, what was it? The Tour of Slovenia. So he was still finishing school when he was racing Mark Cavendish in his first tour of like Slovenia, like which I didn't quite realise. And some of his friends, you know, teenage friends, club mates from Katie Dog, you know, one of them talking about the partying didn't go in the book because I was kind of like, we've all been 18 and
Yeah,
done.
what happens on tour stays on tour. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I wasn't going to shame him, but like lots of great stories on the bike, off the bike. Talked about him building I think, electric wheelbarrow for his school project in like mechanical engineering, and there are lots of nice details there. And yeah, who else I talked to? Teammates, ex-teammates, former trainers at UAE, aerodynamicists, and what's the other word? Biomechanists. I just wanted to get a fully rounded picture, basically, of Tadej Pogačar as a person, as a bike rider too. So I'm just thinking also journalists, Slovenian journalists. Like the Slovenian context was quite important. Like when you consider he spent 18, 19 years of his life there, which is 75%. It basically made him who he is. Like his family values are impeccable. Like I'd love to have parents like he did. They sound like they were fair, fun, and firm, which is kind of like about right. And yeah, you have to go to the place he's from to write a book about Pogačar. Otherwise, it's cheating, I reckon.
Mm. Did you speak to him at all, officially or unofficially?
They kind of they kind of declined to give access for the book for this kind of thing. But you know, firstly, he doesn't win all these bike races by giving many interviews to journalists, like, and you know, he had other fish to fry, like nearly winning Paris-Roubaix and all the rest of it this year. And secondly, his voice runs through it. You know, we've done interviews in the past that included. I had hours and hours and hours of press conference footage and, you know, flash TV interviews that Jean-Francois Quesnay kindly shared with me, and I can have my own too. So in a way, his voice does run through it, like that. You have his reactions when you need his reactions. You have a real sense of how he speaks and how his kind of candour's grown and frankness and even English quality over the years. You know, like when you compare his first Tour de France yellow jersey press conference, you know, when he'd smashed Roglic and everyone was in shock, and he said, this press conference is too big for me. I'm just a kid from Slovenia with 2 sisters and 1 brother. Well, he's so much more natural and able and funny and sometimes a bit cutting. You know, he's himself now. When the mic's in his hand. So hopefully the book gives that change over time too. And you know, his voice is definitely in there. There's plenty of quotes from interviews for sure.
In your opinion, how does he compare as a person and an athlete to previous cycling champions that you've interviewed? Because just touching on his personality there, and I'm not saying I know him either, but just going on from what I've seen at races. My first interaction with him was, I think he won the Tour of California in, I want to say, 2018. And he came into the press room and everyone said, this is Tadej Pogačar from Slovenia. And he was a kid. And I mean that in the most respectful way. And one of the prizes was a giant teddy bear. And I actually took a photo of him and he just was hugging this teddy bear the entire press conference. I'm going to say, like, I didn't have a clue who he was at the time. And fast forward like 2 years later and he's won his first Tour de France and he's now what seems to be, I'm going to say, one of the most, if not the most popular person in the men's peloton. And I compare him, like, you and I worked together at Cycling Weekly and Cycle Sport at the height of the British cycling boom. And to me, there's no one quite comparable. You know, Wiggins was a bit spicy. Cavendish was a bit spicy. Like, Pogačar seems to be universally loved and, dare I say, clean cut.
Yeah, like, it's really funny you mentioned that Tour of California because he was too young to go on the podium to drink the champagne or the victory alcohol that race. So, and the first thing he did with that bear when he got back to Slovenia was give it to his little sister. Literally walked through the airport arrival kind of slide doors. The aura reminds me of Lance Armstrong. You know, I remember media running around after Armstrong in his last tours, the comeback years. And, you know, I've seen the fans shouting "Poggy, Poggy" everywhere, you know, bike races, bike events. But he's nothing like Armstrong in terms of a person. He's not a bully. He's, touch wood, not a doper. We have no evidence for that. Same for Bernardino. You know, these great champions of the past, they were kind of rough and tough and, well, he's certainly tough, but he kind of kills with charisma and kindness. Like I talked to a lot of riders, World Tour riders, off the record as well as on the record, you know, like, how is he really? Come on, like, what's he like in the bunch? What's his team like? Do they throw their weight around? And even off the record, like, none of them said he's a bad person, you know, or lots of his ex-teammates who aren't obliged to say that he's amazing said, you know, he's charming. You know, George Bennett told me that. So I think there's a Poggy persona and a Tadej the person that aren't too far apart. Like, but there is an edge. Don't get me wrong. Like, this kind of clean cut persona only goes so far because, you know, if you want to win any top bike race, let alone 4 tours, you need to have the mongrel in you. You need to be a bit of a bastard deep inside, and he has that edge. Like, so some of the Pogačar performances that I quite enjoyed writing about was when he lost, especially Tour of Flanders, the first one when he was 4th, and he was effing and blinding and saying "F you" because he messed up the sprint basically, and we really don't see that side. We haven't really seen it since quite so obviously, but like, he lost, he messed up, and he hated losing, and that's how it should be. Like, it doesn't mean that he's not clean cut. It just means that, you know, he's wired differently. Like, they're all wired differently, the World Tour cyclists, but he is too. Like, in terms of the will to win, but also the calmness in the race. You know, when his teammates are kind of telling me when they feel the pressure to move up, or people are losing their heads and they've never seen it from him, that makes you realise, okay, he is like on another level for kind of. He doesn't over worry. He doesn't seem to overthink. He doesn't get nervous. Like Vingegaard certainly did for a while. Doesn't anymore, like, apparently. So yeah, I'm just going back to the original question, and the thing is, he's from Slovenia too, which I think is really interesting because to most people who aren't Slovenian, it's like a blank canvas. Much like Peter Sagan being from Slovakia, it's very different to say like an Australian cycling hero or a British one. Like, there's no history there, really, like in terms of top pro cycling. But I actually wonder if internationally, if it's held him back in the sense of, if he was called Tim Parker from California, you know he'd have a night contract by now. He'd be on a sports marketing conveyor belt that is very different to his current journey. I'm not saying that he's small time. I'm just saying he'd be even bigger. But yeah, I actually think that coming from Slovenia might be better for his popularity too, because some people don't even know where that is, probably. You
Yeah.
know?
Do you think there's an element of that that's why he's grounded? Because he doesn't have, I'm going to say from the interactions I've had with him, and you might beg to differ, he doesn't seem to have an ego or an ego befitting someone that, something that he could.
He's got an ego. Like all these champions have an ego. You need that too, like to perform, to react angrily when you have a bad race. I think it definitely has an impact on keeping him grounded. Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as like saying every Slovenian is, industrious, tenacious, quiet, or egoless. Much like you wouldn't say all Aussies are the same kind of people, but they have such an inferiority complex. Many of them from hundreds of years of being like invaded by older, bigger countries around them. That's an impact, and they've only been Primoz Roglic when he was born was Yugoslavian. They've only been an actual country for 34 years, something like that. So it's extremely young in terms of the world, and they didn't have big sporting heroes. They couldn't leave for years. They couldn't leave Yugoslavia and race around the world. So maybe that's one of the reasons now too we're only seeing Slovenian cyclists break through internationally really in the last 10 years because they didn't have the opportunity before. And yeah, as for the greatest argument, Eddie Merckx is a better singer. 'Cause
Wait, you know that for a fact?
yeah, he started singing Rolling Stones to me. Started singing Satisfaction, tapping his feet, and I think it's a really fun debate. The media pins on him. The media and fans he can't go out there and say now I'm the greatest, can he? I mean that does sound pretty arrogant. Merckx said he was the greatest after the 2024 Worlds, and the next day he recanted that opinion, which is quite interesting. It's all about comparing eras, isn't it? Like how 1970 to 2025 is so different. But I definitely think if he has another year like this, a year or two, he is the greatest. There's no question of that. At the moment, he's kind of under the flamme rouge towards greatness. He just needs to not fall off, in terms of his form. But the level is so much deeper and more international than the Merckx era. Even his longevity that Pogacar's had, what are we talking? 20, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years at the very top. That's impressive. That's a long time for modern cycling. Only Chris Froome can, compare to that in terms of, Grand Tours this century. Who I talked to for the book, by the way. Because he can relate to what it actually takes. What changes when you win a Tour de France, mentally and around you. That was quite interesting. But anyway, we're never going to see someone like Pogačar after he retires, for sure. I feel convinced about that. In terms of Tour winners lining up at the Tour of Flanders or starting Paris-Roubaix, let alone winning them or finishing on the podium, he's the ultimate bike racer, and it would be a real shame if this is what I was wondering during the writing sometimes. Is excellent boring? Why is it boring? Because I do get the impression some fans are a little bit tired of the endless breakaways, the endless victories that Poggy is doing. But that's just because he's better. That's sport. It's a simple fact. Maybe we need more of a close rivalry, but the way he wins is not boring. I'm still convinced of that. Attacking with 100k to go when he didn't need to at last year's Worlds. That was really full of jeopardy. crashing in Strade Bianchi and getting up and still winning. Like that's definitely not dull. So
Or
I
even
guess what I'm
taking the
saying,
risks to be a part of all of those races.
yeah, he doesn't need to. Like that's a real change that's happened from the Team Sky days. Like sure, they took some risks. Like I don't want to generalize. Like Chris Froome, the Finestra, that was risk kind of personified. But generally, they had much like UAE actually. Now they had the best team. They tapped up the last mountain and they would attack with 3, 4, 5K to go. Pogačar could do that. He could calculate loads more than he does, or seemingly does, because he's still calculating. That's the other thing. Like when he goes with 80K to go, there's always method. It's not madness, but he's still taking massive risks. Like, and it doesn't always come off. Like people forget. Like Amstel Gold Race this year, he attacked with 40K to go and blew up, and then lost the sprint. So he can lose pretty spectacularly too. But I think it would be good for the sport if there's a second man or even a third man to Pogačar to really to test him again, because like writing the book, looking back, 2022 and 2023 tours were really had something like about them. That like the Grand on stage in 2022 when Visma had their master plan. That's probably the best day of bike racing I've ever seen. Like, and I watched that stage back
Same.
twice or 3 times. And I wrote about it. That's pure cycling. That's like total cycling, as they called it. I want to see more total cycling from the other teams, from rivals, and I do think Remco, if everything goes well, the next few years, I think he has the potential to be very close to Tadej and maybe even beat him in a Grand Tour. I'm talking. Maybe Monument too.
I don't know if you went into this into the book, but just in terms of, you touched on mentality before and mentioning how Froome's mentality changed after Tour wins. For me, that's been an observation this year, in that a lot of rivals of Tadej's have seemed to mentally conceded before the races even started. And in my experience, once you've done that, you may as well not start. My experience being from like an observer, not actually doing the bike race. But are you happy to share a little bit about what some of those, from a mental health perspective, what observations you made in terms of that success and that dominance even before you've taken to the start line?
In terms of his rivals, yeah, the sense of defeatism, or maybe it's reality, it's kind of deepening. I went to the UAE tour and I sat in the pre-race press conference, and the GC contenders they brought out were Pogačar, Pello Bilbao, and Lennart van Eetvelt. And I didn't mess around. I was kind of like asked Bilbao and Van Eetvelt, are you racing for second, basically? And what weaknesses can you find in like Pogačar? And they were quite frank, like that it's almost I think Bilbao said it's almost impossible to beat him if he doesn't make a mistake. Which I think Van Eetvelt said something about, we don't line up racing for second, which is kind of the stock answer you would expect. But the fact is that he's kind of infected most of the peloton with a sense of despondency, or it is reality, because if you try and go toe to toe with him with 70K to go, you see what happens. People blow up. So he's still going to change how races are raced, but it's a real head scratcher. Like, can you preempt him? Probably not. Like when people have, they just get blown past 50K later. So mental health wise, mentally for the World Tour, there needs to be a fearlessness. There needs to be more of a team or rider who is dedicated to taking it to him and is not afraid. And people told me Pogačar has weaknesses. I'm sure he does. They're not very apparent at the moment, but you need to find them, exploit them. Like, could that be his team? Because Isaac Del Toro is the apprentice to the sorcerer. He's 5-6 years younger. He's won nearly as many races, and he barely raced big World Tour ones. Like, he is not going to be happy on that team doing the same race schedule next year, for example. Like, is there going to be some kind of, what's the word?
Cook
Drama?
too many cooks in the kitchen, Team
Yeah.
Sky style. Yeah.
Too many sheriffs in the town, I would be surprised because this is completely foreseeable, isn't it? Like, you'd think surely the management saw this coming last year or ages ago. That doesn't mean there won't be, there's egos, there's ambition. They do seem very friendly. Like, I talked to Del Toro briefly for the book, and he said he really liked working for Tadej. So, but that can all change, and that's another thing that maybe people aren't factoring in, that maybe the biggest threat could be someone from within his own team who knows, or he has maybe an idea of his numbers or his weaknesses. But yeah, like, how do you beat like Pogačar is a question that everyone needs to go back to the drawing board for, and some riders deal with that better than others. Deep down, but one of them admitted to me that when Pogačar came past him and he was hanging on for 5th place in the Tour of Flanders, that he had to almost try to not follow his move, had to try to separate himself from Pogačar as a rival, which is not how human beings race, like, it's abnormal, like. So he found that very weird, and he blew up, and that's why he came 5th in the end. This is Fred Wright, by the way. But
Yeah.
it's scary.
It's
For
scary. Yeah. What was your biggest takeaway from writing this book about Tadej as a person and his place in cycling's hierarchy? Because for me, we're talking about someone who, when you and I started cycling journalism, traditionally, like, the age he's at now is when you'd sort of be hitting your stride, having earned your stripes, not having won what he has.
Yeah, like, they're definitely, they're getting younger and younger when they win. I think, I'm just trying to think what the biggest takeaway is.
Or is there something, phrase it a different way, is there something that really stood out to you in the research you did on him that you didn't know before, that was different to, because you've interviewed or written about some of the greats, that was different to any of them?
I think I didn't realise, he's kind of like, he's probably the perfect bike racer, and I just didn't realise how much that was the truth until I looked at, the setbacks and had the big picture. Like, he's kind of like, he brings the romance you want, but also the modern sports science. He's like the perfect kind of hybrid. I think I didn't really, I definitely didn't realise just how much UAE Team Emirates had changed the game. Maybe that's one of the biggest things. Because when you're writing about Pogačar's ascension to the top, you're really writing also about his team's journey from being 12th in the World Tour when he joined to, well, number one. They're far and away the best, most winning team. And they and Pogačar changed in symbiosis. They helped to raise him. He helps to raise them. They realise the obligation, the need to improve everything, because one of the ex-trainers, John Wakefield, told me he should never have won the Tour in 2020. They weren't a performance Tour-winning team. Like, he said that he should have been 5th because he follows wheels and everything else. But bit by bit, by improving their tech partners, by working on aerodynamics, by coaching methodology, using data. That tour they developed a kind of system, because Pogačar only had 5 teammates, they lost a few. A kind of system to put riders to work on certain stages and then have them rest on certain stages. Obviously, you don't rest during the tour. so they could give him maximal help. All these things, like now they're working with AI, or they have some AI partners anyway. For UAE Team Emirates, like that journey.
In what capacity?
Well, they have they can put every metric you can imagine into a kind of AI dashboard, and they can work out if a rider's overtraining, undertraining on the level, if they're tired, regressing, progressing, all this kind of stuff. I'm not sure to what extent they actually use it, but I was part of a presentation. They showed that to me in the UAE, and that's definitely coming into the sport. I find that interesting, scary in some ways, but I'm thinking more about journalism and AI than actual AI in everyday uses. But yeah, like they are incomparable to Lamprey, to what they were 8 years ago. Like the change is night and day, and you also have to look away from Pogačar to Almeida, Adam Yates, Del Toro, everyone else. Like by having the greatest modern cyclist, they built the greatest modern cycling team. And that was really interesting to see everything around Pogačar.
Do you think that was their plan or Tadej's plan from the beginning? I know Team Sky in their formative years had a very clear objective. We want to be the first British team to win the yellow jersey. Did you get a sense of what is driving Tadej or the team in writing this book? Or is it just natural?
That wasn't the plan. No, that wasn't the plan for either of them. And that's another good thing about being Slovenian, that he flew under the radar for longer. Like when you compare him to, say, Evenepoel, who's from Belgium, and lit up every international junior race, and then had 10 journalists following him at his first pro bike race with Quick-Step. In comparison, even though Pogačar won Tour de l'Avenir, which is the go-to stage race for U23s, he didn't, because he's not from a legacy cycling country, from the European heartland, he was underestimated, by media, maybe by the team, for longer than he should have been. And that played in his favour for pressure. But he just wanted to race a Tour de France, and now he's won 4 of them. I generally don't think there was some kind of big master plan that he had, and UAE certainly didn't have. They had him racing for other riders for most of his first year pro in 2019. He just made the most of timing and opportunity and, being one of the best, the cream riders to the top anyway. But it's a funny one because, most young pro riders want to win races when they turn pro. But I kind of also explore how many of them fall into domestique roles and how there's a hierarchy, and that's partly social and partly performance-wise. So him getting to the top of it within 1 year is not to be sniffed at either. But yeah, there was no plan. This is just, and now who knows where it ends. That's the interesting thing. Because Pogačar said he's at the peak a few times this season. So when is he either going to go down, or when is he going to be surpassed by someone? Well, how do you even go higher than a peak? Logically, you need a rocket thing. Anyway.
I don't know, how long's your book deal? Is there a 2 and 3?
Is there a edition? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, if it keeps going on like this for 5 years, there definitely needs to be double the length. 500 pages. Yeah, I just want to. What's still interesting is the races he hasn't won, and has tried and failed. Milan-San Remo and Paris-Roubaix, and the Vuelta will be interesting. That's what's driving him. I just want there to be a bit more kind of parity and closeness with the other rivals to make it more interesting and motivating for everyone. Though I don't doubt Pogačar's motivation at all.
In your mind, is he the most complete cyclist we've seen ever, or in the modern era?
The thing, it's always hard to compare. Like, I was looking at Merckx's record, and he won a few bunch sprints, flat bunch sprints in the Tour de France. And that's the only reason I would stop short of saying Pogačar's the most complete ever. That's the only reason, like the bunch sprint thing. But everything else, he can win. Everything. If he wins a bunch sprint on the flat, then I'll walk away and say he's the greatest, the most complete. Right there, right then, you know. No, we're seeing something special that we're never going to see ever again, and people should just enjoy it and not hate it, because like before you know it, it won't be the same, and it'll probably be less enterprising tactics, and stage racers sticking to their specialism, staying in their lanes, you know. Stage racers doing stage races all season through, and not doing, you know, even Liège, let alone Flanders or Roubaix. So, yeah, only got a few more years of the Poggy Express train.
Andy McGrath, thank you very much for joining Spokes. Tadej Pogačar Unstoppable is available in all good bookstores in the UK and available for pre-order in Australia.